She was smoothing his bedsheets when he walked in, and the handprint-shaped bruise on her face made Arturo Lavezzi stop breathing. His new maid stammered something about falling downstairs, but he saw what she was really doing, counting the seconds until she could run. What she didn't know. He just decided whoever put that mark on her would beg for death before he granted it. Arturo Lavezzi noticed everything. The way Erica Underwood flinched when doors opened too fast. How she never turned her back to windows. The deliberate way she kept her sleeves pulled down even in the suffocating heat of his estate. But he hadn't noticed the bruises. Not until now. Master Suite. Afternoon. She reached across his bed to tuck the corner of a silk sheet, and her sleeve rode up. Dark purple fingerprints, wrapped completely around her wrist. 5 distinct marks where someone had grabbed her hard enough to nearly break bone. Erica. His voice was quiet. Deadly quiet. She spun around, yanking her sleeve down so violently she nearly tore the fabric. Her eyes went wide, not with surprise, but with the kind of raw terror that told Arturo everything he needed to know. She thought he was angry at her. "Mr. Lavezzi, I can explain. Show me your face." "What?" "Turn." Around. Her hands were shaking as she obeyed. That's when the afternoon light hit her cheek at just the right angle, revealing what the makeup couldn't hide. A massive bruise in the perfect shape of an open palm. Someone had slapped her. Hard. Arturo had built his empire on violence. He'd done things that kept him awake at night. But he had one sacred rule. You don't put your hands on someone who can't fight back. And you definitely don't touch anything that belongs to him. Who did this? "Nobody, sir. I fell." Erica. He stepped closer, watching her force herself not to retreat. "I'm going to ask you one time. Who did this?" She opened her mouth, closed it. He could see the war happening behind her eyes, the desperate need to tell someone, fighting against whatever terror kept her silent. Then her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. The color drained from her face so fast, Arturo thought she might collapse. She pulled out the phone with trembling fingers. Arturo glimpsed the screen for just a second before she shoved it away. "I see you found new work. Pretty estate. But you know I'll find you." That's when Arturo Lavezzi made a decision. Whoever was hunting this woman had just made the fatal mistake of stepping into his territory. And Arturo always protected what was his. If you're already hooked by Arturo's deadly promise and need to know what happens when he discovers who's been terrorizing Erica, subscribe now. Because what he does next will redefine everything she thought she knew about protection, power, and the kind of man who doesn't just save you. He destroys anyone who ever made you afraid. Hit that subscribe button and let's find out together how far a mafia boss will go for the woman he's claimed as his own. Julian Vane moved through Erica's quarters like a ghost. Arturo stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching his head of security work. Julian had been with him for 8 years, former MI6, paranoid as hell, and the only man Arturo trusted to find what others missed. "Talk to me," Arturo said quietly. Julian didn't look up from the small device in his hand, its screen glowing blue as he swept it across Erica's nightstand. "If there's something here, I'll find it." The room was sparse. A single bed with white linens. A wooden dresser with 3 framed photos. A woman who looked like an older version of Erica. A golden retriever. A sunset over water. A small closet with maybe 6 outfits total. This wasn't the room of someone living. This was the room of someone hiding. "Check everything," Arturo ordered. "Clothes, books, personal items. I want to know how he's tracking her." Because someone was. That text message hadn't been a guess. "I see you found new work." Pretty estate meant surveillance. Real time. Which meant either someone had followed her here or boss. Julian's voice cut through his thoughts. Got a signal. Arturo moved closer. Julian was holding the detector over a small jewelry box on the dresser. The blue light pulsed faster, more insistent. Julian opened the box carefully. Inside, tangled with a few cheap bracelets and a pair of small pearl earrings, was a silver locket. "That," Julian said, lifting it with gloved hands. "This is transmitting." Arturo felt ice slide down his spine. "Open it." Julian worked the clasp with precision. The locket split, revealing two tiny photos inside, one of the same woman from the framed picture, another of a beach at sunset. Normal, sentimental. But when Julian turned it over, Arturo saw it. A micro GPS tracker, no bigger than a watch battery, embedded seamlessly into the silver backing. Professional grade. Expensive. The kind of tech you didn't buy at a spy store. You bought it from someone with serious connections. "Jesus," Julian breathed. "This is military-level hardware. Range is probably unlimited as long as she's near cell towers." He's been watching her every move. Arturo stared at the locket, rage building like pressure behind his ribs. How long? Julian examined it closer. Based on the model? Could have been active for months. Maybe longer. Months. This bastard had been tracking her for months. Every step she took, every place she ran to, and she'd had no idea she was carrying her own leash. "She doesn't know," Arturo said quietly. It wasn't a question. "No way she knows. This thing's too well hidden. She probably thinks it's just her grandmother's locket or something." Julian looked up, meeting Arturo's eyes. "Whoever planted this is a professional, or knows how to hire one." Arturo took the locket from Julian's hands, feeling its weight. So small, so innocent looking. The perfect trap. "Can you trace who installed it?" "I can try." "But boss?" Julian's expression darkened. "Whoever this guy is, he's not some angry ex-boyfriend. This is calculated, patient, expensive." Arturo closed his fist around the locket. Good. That meant when he found this man, the hunt would actually be interesting. Julian's report landed on Arturo's desk at midnight. Arturo poured himself 2 fingers of scotch and opened the folder. What he read made his jaw tighten with every line. Silas Thorne, age 34. Debt collector for the Konstantin Bratva. A photo, paperclipped to the first page, showed a man with dead eyes and a smile that never reached them. Handsome in a cold, calculated way. The kind of face that could charm you before it destroyed you. Arturo kept reading. Thorne had started as low-level muscle for the Russian syndicate that controlled Chicago's South Side. Collections, intimidation, the occasional kneecapping. But he'd climbed fast not because he was smart, but because he was willing to do things other men wouldn't, especially to women. The list made Arturo's blood run cold. 2019, assault charge. Dropped when the victim stopped cooperating. 2020, restraining order filed by ex-girlfriend, violated 6 times before she disappeared. Police report noted victim relocated, case closed. 2021, emergency room visit by a woman named Sarah Pembroke. Broken ribs, fractured jaw. She claimed she fell. Nurses noted finger-shaped bruises around her throat. The pattern was unmistakable. Silas Thorne didn't just hurt women. He enjoyed it. And he was smart enough to choose victims who couldn't fight back. Women with no family, no money, no one who'd come looking. Julian had attached a note. Married Erica Underwood 14 months ago. Certificate shows she signed under debt assumption agreement, basically. He bought her father's gambling debt and forced her into marriage as payment. Father died 6 months later. Heart attack. Arturo read that line 3 times. Her father's debt. Silas had turned a broken man's mistakes into a legal cage for his daughter. She hadn't married him. She'd been sold to him. The next page was worse. Police reports from their 8-month marriage read like a horror story. 3 emergency room visits. 2 wellness checks from concerned neighbors. 1 911 call that Erica hung up on before officers arrived. Each time, she'd refuse to press charges. Each time, She'd protected the man destroying her, until 4 months ago, when she'd finally run. Julian's final note was clipped. Konstantin Bratva officially disavowed him 2 months ago. Word on the street is Thorne's been skimming collections, running side jobs. He's operating solo now. Dangerous because he's got nothing to lose. Arturo closed the folder and stared out his window at the Chicago skyline. Silas Thorne, a predator who'd built his entire life around breaking women who couldn't escape. A man who believed Erica was his property, bought and paid for. A man who'd planted a tracker in her locket and sent her messages to remind her that running was pointless. Arturo picked up his phone and called Julian. "Find him," he said simply. "I want to know where he sleeps, where he eats, who he talks to. Everything. And when I find him..." Arturo's smile was colder than the scotch burning his throat. "Then we teach him what happens when you touch something that belongs to me." Arturo told himself he was protecting an asset. That's what he repeated as he stood on the second-floor balcony at 7 a.m., watching Erica move through the gardens below. She was clipping dead roses from the bushes. Her movements, methodical, controlled. Like everything she did was a performance designed to be invisible. He told himself this was tactical, smart. Silas could make a move at any time, and Arturo needed to be ready. But that didn't explain why he'd been standing here for 20 minutes. She reached for a high bloom, and her sleeve slipped again just an inch. Arturo saw her freeze, glance around like she expected someone to materialize from the hedges, then quickly adjust her cuff. Even alone, she was afraid. Something tightened in his chest. By noon, he'd relocated to the library balcony overlooking the main hall. Erica was polishing the marble floors, her reflection moving in long, careful strokes across the stone. She wore her hair pulled back tight, no makeup, clothes deliberately plain, trying to disappear in plain sight. It was working. His other staff barely noticed her. She'd perfected the art of being a ghost. But Arturo noticed everything. The way she kept her back to the walls. How she startled when footsteps approached too quickly. The fact that she never, ever smiled. Not once in the days since she'd started working here. What kind of hell had she lived through to erase something as simple as a smile? At 3 p.m., he found himself in his study, positioned where he could see through the French doors to the terrace. Erica was setting up for afternoon tea service, a routine task she'd taken on. She arranged cups with mathematical precision, each one exactly 2 inches from the plate, each spoon aligned perfectly. Arturo watched her hands. They didn't shake anymore, not like they had in his bedroom when he'd confronted her. She'd learned to control the fear, bury it so deep that only someone watching closely would see it in the tension of her shoulders, the tight set of her jaw. He was watching closely, too closely. "You're going to burn a hole through that door." Arturo didn't turn. Julian had appeared beside him, silent as always, just monitoring the situation. "Right." Julian's tone was dry. "That why you've rescheduled 3 meetings today? Monitoring?" Arturo shot him a look that would have made most men step back. Julian just raised an eyebrow. "She's a target," Arturo said coldly. "Until we neutralize Thorne, she needs protection. So assign someone to guard her. You've got 8 men who could..." "No." The word came out harder than he'd intended. Julian went quiet, studying him with those sharp MI6 eyes that missed nothing. Out on the terrace, Erica finished arranging the tea service and stepped back to examine her work. For just a second, maybe less, her hand drifted to her ribs. A small, unconscious gesture, like she was checking for pain that was no longer there, but her body remembered anyway. Arturo felt rage bloom hot and fresh in his chest. "I'll handle it," he said quietly. Julian was silent for a long moment. Then, "Boss, you know what this looks like, right?" Arturo knew exactly what it looked like. He just didn't care. The package arrived at the front gate at 9:47 p.m. Arturo was in his study reviewing security footage when Julian called. "We've got a delivery. No return address. Guard says it's addressed to Erica Underwood." Arturo was down the stairs before Julian finished the sentence. The gate guard had already isolated the package, a small box wrapped in brown paper, sitting on the security desk like a coiled snake. Arturo pulled on gloves and cut the tape carefully. Inside was a single item. A photograph. Erica. Taken yesterday. She was walking through his gardens, clipping roses, completely unaware of the camera. The angle suggested it had been shot from outside the estate walls, through the iron fence with a telephoto lens, and written across the bottom in red marker, "Pretty cage." But still a cage. Arturo stared at the words, ice flooding his veins. Silas had been here, on his property, close enough to photograph Erica through his own goddamn fence. "There's more," Julian said quietly, pulling out a folded piece of paper tucked beneath the photo. Arturo unfolded it. The handwriting was neat, controlled, deliberate. "She looks good, doesn't she? Healthy. Almost forgot what she looks like when she's not crying. But don't worry, I'll remind her soon. You can keep her warm for me, Lavezzi. When I come to collect what's mine, I'll be sure to thank you personally." The signature was just two initials, S.T. Arturo read it twice, then he started to laugh. It wasn't a pleasant sound. "Boss?" Julian looked concerned. "He thinks I'm a storage facility." Arturo set the letter down, his smile razor-sharp. "He actually thinks I'm just keeping her safe until he decides to pick her up. That's bold, considering whose property he just violated. Bold." Arturo turned the word over in his mouth like good wine. "No, Julian, it's arrogant. And arrogance is exploitable." He pulled out his phone and texted a number he rarely used. 3 words. "Time to play." Julian watched him carefully. "What are you thinking?" Arturo picked up the photograph again, studying Silas's handwriting. Every letter perfectly formed, controlled. This was a man who believed he was in charge, who thought fear was his weapon, who'd probably terrorized Erica with messages like this for months. Time to show him what real fear looked like. "He wants to play cat and mouse?" Arturo said quietly. "Fine, but he's made one critical mistake." "What's that?" Arturo looked at Julian, and his smile could have cut glass. "He thinks he's the cat." 20 minutes later, Arturo's tech specialist had traced the package's drop-off point to a courier service in South Chicago. The security footage showed a man matching Silas's description, paying cash, wearing a hoodie, keeping his face down, but not down enough. "Got him," the specialist said, enhancing the image. There, a clear shot of Silas's face as he'd glanced up at the street. Arturo leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Julian, I want surveillance on every place he's been in the last week. I want to know his patterns, his routines, where he feels safe." "Planning to hit him where he lives?" "No." Arturo's eyes glinted dangerously. "I'm planning to make him come to me, on my terms, in my territory." He picked up a blank card and began to write. Arturo found her in the kitchen at midnight, scrubbing counters that were already spotless. She jumped when he entered, the sponge slipping from her hands into the sink. "Mr. Lavezzi, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." "Sit down, Erica. I should finish. Now." She sat at the small kitchen table, hands folded in her lap, eyes on the floor. Arturo retrieved 2 wine glasses and a bottle of Chianti from the cellar. He poured generously and slid one across the table. "I don't drink," she said quietly. "Tonight you do." He sat across from her, his own glass untouched. "Drink, Erica. That's not a request." Her hands trembled as she lifted the glass. She took a small sip, then another. He watched the tension in her shoulders ease slightly, her breathing slow. "Why are you being kind to me?" The question came out barely above a whisper. "Is that what you think this is? Kindness?" She looked up then, meeting his eyes for the first time. "You could have fired me, thrown me out. Most people would have. I'm not most people." Arturo leaned forward. "And you're going to tell me everything, starting with why Silas Thorne thinks he owns you, The color drained from her face. How do you... I know everything, Erica. The tracker in your locket, the package he sent, the fact that he's been hunting you for months. He kept his voice level, controlled. What I don't know is why you think you can't escape him. She took a longer drink of wine, her eyes glistening. Because I can't. There's a contract. Show me. I don't have it. He does. Her voice cracked. My father. He gambled. Badly. He owed the Konstantin Bratva $60,000. When he couldn't pay, Silas bought the debt. Arturo's jaw tightened. And he offered my father a deal. The debt disappears if I marry him. Just a piece of paper, he said. A formality. She laughed bitterly. My father was dying. Heart disease. The stress was killing him. So I signed. That's not a legal contract, Erica. Marrying someone to pay off debt. It is when it's notarized. Witnessed. When there are clauses about willful abandonment and breach of marital contract. She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. Silas showed it to me on our wedding night. Said if I ever left, he'd use it to have me arrested for fraud. He has lawyers. Real ones. I have nothing. Arturo sat back. Processing. Your father? Dead. 6 months after the wedding. His heart gave out. Her voice turned hollow. I think knowing what he'd done to me killed him faster than the disease. The kitchen fell silent, except for the soft sound of her crying. Arturo picked up his wine and drained it in one swallow. Then he stood, walked to her side of the table, and crouched down until they were eye level. Look at me, Erica. She did, her eyes red and broken. That contract? Arturo's voice was steel wrapped in silk. It's worthless. And Silas Thorne is about to learn what happens when you forge chains in my territory. Arturo made 3 phone calls before dawn. The first was to Viktor Sokolov, a banker who owed him a favor involving his daughter's unfortunate gambling problem. I need account numbers flagged. Silas Thorne. Everything he touches, I want frozen. Victor's voice was groggy but sharp. The collector? He banks with us under shell companies. 3 accounts, maybe 40,000 total. Not anymore. Freeze them. Make it look like federal seizure. Consider it done. The second call was to Tobias Rask, who ran information like other men ran businesses. I need digital footprints, transfers from Konstantin Bratva accounts to Silas Thorne's personal holdings. Make it look like he's been skimming for months. How creative should I be? Creative enough that Konstantin's auditors find it. Not so creative they suspect a plant. Tobias laughed. You're framing him to his own bosses. That's cold even for you. He likes playing with other people's property. Time he learns the cost. The third call was to Konstantin himself. Dmitry Konstantin was old-school Bratva, a man who'd built his empire on loyalty and brutal efficiency. He answered on the second ring. Lavezzi, it's 5 a.m. We need to talk about your former employee. A pause. Thorne? That rat's not my problem anymore. He is now. Arturo's voice was ice. He's been operating on the south side using your name, collecting debts, intimidating people, claiming Bratva protection. He could hear Konstantin's breathing change. That piece of shit. I cut him loose 2 months ago. I know. But your reputation is still taking the hit. Arturo, let that sink in. There's more. My people found some interesting financial transfers. Looks like he's been skimming your collections for at least 8 months. $250,000, maybe more. The silence on the other end was dangerous. You're certain? My accountant will send you the documentation within the hour. Tobias's fabricated evidence was already in Arturo's inbox. Offshore accounts. Shell companies. He's been bleeding you dry while you trusted him. Konstantin's voice dropped to a growl. Where is he? That's the question, isn't it? Arturo smiled. But Dmitry, when you find him, I'd appreciate a conversation first. He has something of mine. What's he got that you can't take? A woman. He's been stalking her, threatening her. She's under my protection now. Another pause. Then Constantine laughed, dark and knowing. So that's what this is. You're not calling about money or territory. You're calling because someone touched your property. Exactly. I like you, Lavezzi. You're old school. Constantine's tone shifted. Fine. I'll put the word out. When my people find him, and they will, we'll have a discussion about his debt to me. Then he's yours. Generous, not generous. Practical. A man who steals from me and disrespects you? Constantine's smile was audible. That man's already dead. He just doesn't know it yet. Arturo hung up and checked his watch. 5:47 a.m. By noon, Silas's accounts would be frozen. By evening, Constantine's enforcers would be hunting him. By tomorrow, Silas Thorne would be desperate, cornered, and exactly where Arturo wanted him. Afraid. The hunting lodge sat 60 miles north of Chicago, buried deep in Wisconsin woods where cell service died and questions weren't asked. Arturo owned it through a shell company. 3 bedrooms, a stone fireplace, and enough isolation that a man could scream for hours without anyone hearing. Perfect. You're sure about this? Julian stood in the main room, checking sight lines and exit points. He'll come. Arturo walked to the window overlooking the gravel drive. Desperate men make predictable choices. Julian had already positioned 4 men in the woods, invisible, armed, waiting. The lodge itself was wired with cameras in every room. This wasn't just a trap, it was a stage, and Arturo wanted to watch every second. How are you getting him here? Arturo pulled out a burner phone. The same way you lure any predator. With bait. He typed carefully, mimicking the panicked, fragmented style of someone on the run. Can't stay at the estate anymore. Boss is asking too many questions. Found a place up north. Alone, finally. Please just leave me alone. He attached GPS coordinates to the lodge and sent it from a number Tobias had cloned to look like Erica's phone. Julian watched over his shoulder. You think he's that stupid? I think he's that arrogant. Arturo pocketed the phone. He's been tracking her for months, controlling her. In his mind, she's already his. This message? It's not suspicious. It's confirmation. That she's running scared and alone. Exactly. Arturo's smile was wolf-like. He won't be able to resist. 20 minutes later, Tobias called. He took the bait. Silas's phone just pinged a cell tower heading north on I-94. He's moving fast. Eta. 90 minutes, maybe less. Arturo looked at Julian. Get the men in position. Nobody move until I give the signal. I want him inside the lodge, comfortable, thinking he's won. Julian nodded and disappeared into the woods. Arturo walked through the lodge one final time. He'd staged it perfectly, Erica's suitcase by the door, her jacket draped over a chair, a half-drunk cup of tea on the kitchen counter, every detail screaming that she'd just arrived, that she was here, that she was alone. He turned off all the lights except one dim lamp in the bedroom. Then he settled into the shadows of the main room and waited. The woods outside were silent. No birds, no wind, just the kind of heavy, expectant quiet that came before violence. Arturo checked his watch. 7:23 p.m. Silas would arrive thinking he was the hunter, a predator coming to reclaim his prey. He'd probably rehearsed what he'd say, how he'd terrify her, how he'd drag her back to Chicago and remind her why running was pointless. He'd walk through that door expecting to find a frightened woman. Instead, he'd find Arturo Lavezzi. And then Silas Thorne would learn the difference between a man who hurt the helpless and a man who broke those who deserved it. Headlights appeared through the trees. Arturo's smile widened in the darkness. Showtime. The car door slammed at 8:47 p.m. Arturo didn't move from his position in the shadows. He watched through the window as Silas Thorne approached the lodge. Confident, unhurried. A predator who thought he'd already won. Silas was exactly as his photo suggested, handsome in a cold way, well-dressed, carrying himself with the arrogance of a man who'd never faced real consequences. He paused at the door, smoothed his hair, adjusted his jacket. getting ready for his performance. The door opened slowly. Silas stepped inside, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. "Erica?" His voice was smooth, practiced. "Baby, I know you're here. I can feel it." He moved deeper into the lodge, passing within 3 feet of where Arturo stood motionless in the darkness. "Come on, sweetheart. We both know this is pointless. You can't hide from me. You know that, right?" Silas walked to the bedroom doorway, saw the lamp, the staged suitcase. His shoulders relaxed. "There you are. I've been so worried about—" Arturo stepped out of the shadows. Silas spun around, his hand moving toward his jacket, a gun, probably, but Arturo was faster. He caught Silas's wrist mid-draw and twisted. The crack of breaking bone echoed through the lodge. Silas screamed. Arturo said nothing. He drove his fist into Silas's solar plexus, folding him in half, then swept his legs. Silas hit the floor hard, gasping for air that wouldn't come. "Who?" Silas choked. "Who the fuck?" Arturo crouched down, his face inches from Silas's. Still, he said nothing. He wanted Silas to see him, really see him, to understand in this moment that he hadn't walked into a reunion. He'd walked into an execution. Recognition flickered in Silas's eyes. "Lavezzi?" Arturo smiled. Then he went to work. Every punch was calculated, every break deliberate. This wasn't rage, it was precision. Arturo had learned violence from men who treated it like surgery, and he'd perfected it over 20 years. The ribs Silas had broken on Erica Arturo broke the same ones on him. The wrist he'd grabbed hard enough to bruise Arturo shattered it. The hand he'd used to slap her face, Arturo crushed every bone in it. Silas tried to beg, tried to bargain, offered money, information, anything. Arturo never said a word. Because this wasn't a negotiation. This was a lesson. And the only language men like Silas understood was pain. When it was done, Silas lay broken on the floor, consciousness flickering. Blood pooled beneath him. His breathing was shallow, rattling. Arturo stood, straightened his jacket, and checked his watch. 15 minutes. Efficient. He pulled out his phone and made one call. Constantine. He's ready for pickup. Alive? Barely. Constantine laughed. Good. I want him to know what's coming. Arturo ended the call and looked down at Silas one last time. The man who'd terrorized Erica, who'd bought her like property, who'd tracked her, threatened her, owned her. Now he was just broken meat waiting for the bratva. Arturo walked to the door without looking back. Outside, Julian emerged from the trees. Clean, spotless. They disappeared into the woods as headlights approached from the south. Constantine's men? Coming to collect their debt? Arturo returned to the estate at midnight. He found Erica in the library, curled in a chair by the window, staring at nothing. She'd been waiting, probably too terrified to sleep, too afraid to hope. She stood when he entered, her eyes searching his face for answers she was too scared to ask for. Arturo said nothing. He simply walked to the fireplace, pulled the silver locket from his pocket, and dropped it into the flames. Erica gasped. "That was my grandmother's." "No." Arturo watched the metal begin to warp and melt. "That was your prison. Now it's ashes." She moved closer, staring at the fire. "The tracker? Gone, along with the man who planted it." Her breath caught. "Silas? Won't be bothering you again." Arturo's tone was final. "Ever?" Erica's knees buckled. She caught herself on the mantel, her whole body shaking. Not with fear this time, with relief so overwhelming it looked like pain. "Is he dead? Does it matter?" She looked at him then, tears streaming down her face. "I need to know if I'm free." Arturo reached into his other pocket and pulled out the contract. The one Julian's people had retrieved from Silas's apartment before Constantine's men arrived. He held it up so she could see her signature, her father's shaking handwriting, Silas's notarized lies. Then he threw it into the fire, too. "You were never bound by that," Arturo said quietly, watching the paper blacken and curl. It was garbage dressed up as legality. But now, even the garbage is gone. Erica sank to her knees, sobbing. Not the silent, controlled tears she'd cried in the kitchen. These were the kind of sobs that came from somewhere deep, from months of terror finally releasing. Arturo let her cry. He poured 2 glasses of scotch and waited. When she finally looked up, her eyes were red, but clear. "Why did you do this?" "Because you're mine to protect. I'm just a maid." "No." Arturo handed her a glass. "You were never just a maid. Not from the moment I saw those bruises." He walked to his desk and pulled out a folder. Inside was a contract, a real one this time. He set it in front of her. Head of household operations. Salary, benefits, a suite on the 3rd floor. You'll manage the staff, oversee the estate, handle security protocols. He met her eyes. "You'll sit at my table, Erica, not serve it." She stared at the contract like it might disappear. "I don't understand." "Then let me be clear." Arturo crouched down to her level, the way he had in the kitchen. "You survived a monster. You ran when you had nothing. You kept breathing when most people would have broken." His voice softened. "That's not weakness. That's strength. And I value strength." Erica's hand trembled as she touched the contract. "What if I'm not ready?" "Then you'll learn." Arturo stood. "But you'll learn as someone who belongs here, not as someone hiding." She looked at the fireplace, where the locket and contract had burned to nothing. Then she looked at the new contract, a choice between ashes and a future. She picked up the pen. "One condition," she whispered. "Name it. No one ever calls me his again." Arturo's smile was genuine for the first time in days. "Deal." Some cages are made of lies. Some are made of fear. But every cage has a key. Sometimes you just need someone willing to break the lock. If Erica's story of survival moved you, there are thousands more waiting. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story about broken people finding their strength and protectors who refuse to let darkness win. Drop a comment below. Would you have run like Erica or fought back sooner? Your story matters too.